I mean, how many people, including myself, go through life trying to get to this like career goal or monetary goal. Once you get there, you realize like that actually didn't make me happy.
Teenagers in the United States are spending 70% less time in person with their friends than they were 2 decades ago. It can feel really dark, but when you embrace it as sort of the cost of entry for this transformation that you were trying to create in your life, I think that's an empowering way of looking at it as well, of recognizing it's part of the process. It is a natural part of your growth and change as a person. Like if I were to track my happiness during the course of different days, guaranteed the low points would be when I'm scrolling around on social media.
Same.
Your best days are when you're like focused on action and you're doing things and there's structure around it and you kind of know what you're doing. Your worst days are when you're kind of floating and you end up just sitting there scrolling, comparing yourself to others, fix my own internal insecurities by getting enough external affirmations that I was impressive.
But if someone is trying to find someone like that, someone who can give them guidance or help them through this journey of life, do you have any tips for them? Welcome to another episode of the Save Yourself podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Sahil Bloom, who has a brand new book out that is called The 5 Types of Wealth. It is his debut nonfiction book. And it's hit shelves on February 4th, 2025, so pretty much right around the time of this interview. So Sahil is an inspirational author, entrepreneur, captivating millions of people every week through his social insights and bi-weekly newsletter, The Curiosity Chronicle. His debut book, as I mentioned, The 5 Types of Wealth, is about to come out February 4th, 2025. Apple CEO Tim Cook called it a powerful call to action to think deeply about what lights you up, a guide for how to build a life with meaning and purpose around those things. The book is a unique blend of strategies, tactics, actionable insights, enabling readers to make real positive changes and lead to healthier, wealthier lives. He is a successful entrepreneur, owner of SRB Holdings, a personal holding company currently comprised of 10 cash-flowing businesses, and the managing partner of SRB Ventures, a $10 million venture investment firm committed to investing in and accelerating the most compelling startups in the world. And prior to starting SRB Ventures in January 2022, Sahil was an early-stage investor in 40-plus startups across the tech landscape, including multiple unicorns. And before that, he was a private equity investor and served on the board of several middle-market companies. He graduated from Stanford. Sorry to talk about you in the third person. Like he graduated Stanford in economics and public policy, and he was a 4-year member of the baseball team. And you have all these awards and athletes academically. Sahil was advised in his pursuits by the former Secretary of State, Dr. Condoleezza Rice. Oh my gosh, amazing to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for doing it.
I am such a fan of this book. So the 5 Types of Wealth. I will kind of ask you maybe a little more controversial question or provocative. What is everyone getting wrong in life? Like, why did you write this book?
The scoreboard is broken, or at least incomplete. The way that people are measuring their lives, the way that we have become accustomed to measuring ourselves, stacking ourselves up against others, thinking about our own progress in life has historically been this default scoreboard, which is money. That is primarily because it is so measurable. Peter Drucker, the management theorist, once said, "What gets measured gets managed." It's the idea that the thing that you can measure ends up being the thing that you focus on, the thing that you like narrowly hone in on and optimize around. And money has been that. And because it is so measurable, it becomes the thing that we hone in on and focus on. And it is kind of the sole way that we have to really track our progress in life and the way that we're looking at ourselves. You sit on your phone and you like keep refreshing the net worth tracking app, whatever it is that you use. And the problem is that money isn't nothing. It just can't be the only thing. And so if you have a scoreboard that is only focused on this one thing, but we know that building a fulfilling, happy life is actually based on money plus a bunch of other things, we need a way to redefine the scoreboard, to build a new scoreboard that actually contributes to us taking the right actions to build a life around that broader set of things that is going to bring that fulfillment and happiness. And that's really what this book is. It's building out a new way to measure your life around the broader set of pillars that do contribute to that life that you are actually looking to build. With the theory being, if you measure for just the one battle of money, you might win that battle, but you are probably going to lose the broader war, which is about all of these other things. So we need to measure for the broader war so that we can track and work against that.
100%. I mean, how many people, including myself, go through life trying to get to this like career goal or monetary goal, and once you get there, you realize like that actually didn't make me happy. And that's the scariest thing. I mean, that happened to me. I know that happens to so many people.
I mean, over and over again. It's actually a common human phenomenon, too. It's called the arrival fallacy. Mm-hmm. Like you think that once you get to whatever achievement, goal, promotion, title, income level that you've propped up as the destination, you think once you get there, you're going to feel like you've arrived. You're going to have this lasting feeling of contentment and satisfaction. And then inevitably, you get that thing. You get the like momentary blip of euphoria, kind of induced dopamine. And then you immediately feel this sort of dread almost of like, okay, now I have to do more. What's the next summit, the next thing that someone else has that I don't? And that's really sad, because what happens to a lot of people is that they just spend their whole life chasing some more off in the horizon and never appreciate the thing in the present. They never build their life around the thing that actually allows them to thrive, to feel like you've arrived every single day.
So how do you appreciate the things that you have or where you've come? What are some strategies?
Well, pausing way more frequently is probably the best way that I know for instilling gratitude in the present. I think that we live in a world where the idea of space is something that I write a lot about in the book. In the mental wealth section, I talk about space as being one of the 3 pillars of mental wealth. And basically what that is we operate in this world where you have constant stimulus and then constant response. And Viktor Frankl, the famous Holocaust survivor and psychologist, talks about the fact that your power in life exists in the space that you can create between stimulus and response, because that's what allows you to actually choose your response, is when you can pause and create that space. That idea of space is something that most people never create any of. You get on this like busy treadmill, like you're a
it's
hamster.
It's almost easier not to think, not to be by yourself, or like not to
you don't have to create solitude. You don't have to create that stillness. And it turns out that space is actually where you end up creating a whole lot of the moments of gratitude that spark happiness, improve mental health, better sleep, all of those things. But it's also where you end up having the best ideas that lead to the better outcomes in your life, financially and creatively, and anything that you're working on. We kind of know that in the back of our minds. Like, you know that you happen to have some of your best ideas in the shower or while driving in the car. And it's because there's no stimulus. You don't have constant, pings from your phone, checking text, social media, all of those things. It's just space. But we need to do a better job of creating more of that in our lives.
I think creating space, for me, often that's creating space from the phone and creating space from the to-do list of the day, which is often the phone. So what is like a simple strategy that you use that people can use or find from the book that they can use to find that space? Yeah,
I talk about in the book this study that Microsoft did where they took a group of people through a work day and they put EEGs all over their head. And then they had one group go through a day of back-to-back meetings. Okay. And then they had another group go through a day where they took a 5-minute break in between a bunch of back-to-back meetings. And what they found was really interesting, which was the group from back-to-back meetings just saw stress build up basically linearly across them, and performance went down. The group that had the little 5-minute break in between them never had a stress buildup, and performance was really strong throughout.
What'd they do for those 5 minutes?
Breathe.
Walk outside?
Walk, breathe. Literally nothing.
I would walk outside, get some. I have learned to build in those little, and I go outside for that break, because for me, something about being in nature automatically brings that cortisol level down.
I'm the exact same way.
Yeah.
I have a whole thing in the book on walking.
Yes.
And how walking is this free, unbelievable life hack habit.
Oh my God. And I get the best ideas. Like you're saying shower.
I mean, it is basically the single most important life hack. Not just ideas, by the way. relationships, if you go on a walk with someone,
Yes.
there's actually scientific evidence that walking with someone increases your feelings of connection with them. When your
Yes.
gates are aligned, it creates this feeling of connection. And so
So
whether
beautiful.
you're like trying to you build on a relationship, or if you need to have a hard conversation with someone, doing it while on a walk is a much easier and better, more effective way to do it. Because A, you don't have to have direct eye contact, so it makes it feel less uncomfortable doing it. And you're increasing this feeling of connection, so the person sort of knows that you're on the same side while you're having
love
that hard
that.
conversation.
I love that idea because I'm like someone who struggles with those kind of difficult conversations or feedback. And so I think doing it on a walk is a great idea.
Yeah, with a partner, like if you have a hard
Yeah.
conversation now with your partner,
Yes.
doing it while out on a walk,
Yes.
much more effective.
So what are the 5 types of wealth? If you can break it down and
Yeah.
give a maybe a description. I think they're self-explanatory for the most part. But
Yeah. So the 5 types of wealth are 1, time wealth. This is all about the freedom to choose how you spend your time, who you spend it with, where you spend it, when you trade it for something else. It's about an awareness of the finite, impermanent nature of your time, about time as your most precious resource. Social wealth is all about your relationships. It's the people in your life.
you have a whole section with Arthur Brooks,
Yes.
that study on relationships. I think that is so, I just love that because it really makes you, for me, coming from the health world, I really realize like, doesn't matter if you get your food right, your exercise right, like you need to build those proper relationships and also deal with your mind. Those things cannot be like, ignored because most people, when they talk about health, they talk about fitness and nutrition. They don't talk about the other portions.
Yeah, and the scientific evidence around relationship impact on your health is enormous. That
stronger.
study that you're referring
Yeah.
to, the Harvard study of adult development, it was conducted over the course of 85 years. They followed the lives of 1,300 original participants and then 700 plus of their direct descendants. And they found that the single greatest predictor of physical health at age 80 was relationship satisfaction at age 50. So it wasn't your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your smoking or drinking habits. It was how you felt about your relationships at 50 that impacted your aging at 80.
Was that just your significant other relationship, or is it all relationships?
All relationships.
Family, friends.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was basically whether you felt that you had strong
Strong
loving
ties,
bonds,
social ties, yeah.
people that you could call in the middle of the night if there was a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
They sort of defined true loneliness as not feeling like you could call on anyone.
So sad.
And the study's current director, Dr. Robert Waldinger, wrote a great
Mm-hmm.
book called Good Life. He's become a friend over the last few years, and is just like the work that they've done is remarkable in making people understand that investments in your social connection, in social relationships, are just as important as any other investment that you make. That's one of the big meta ideas of this whole book is we understand that investments in financial assets compound value in our lives. That if you invest $100 today, it'll compound and be worth more than that in the future. And that 100 today is worth more than 0 today. So you should just invest a little bit now for something big later. The exact same thing applies to all of these areas. A small investment in your relationship, sending the one text to the friend when you're thinking about them, making the phone call to your parent, getting together with your sibling for a coffee, that compounds over a long time. And
Yeah, you
not
talk about that
doing it-
compounding
yeah.
effect. Sorry, go now.
No, it's so important. It's just, your relationship investments stack up the exact same way as anything else that you do in your life. And we don't typically think about that. So it's a mindset shift that people need to have because
Yeah.
it reminds you that anything above 0 compounds positively. So you don't
So
need
good.
to go out for hours with the friend in order to compound the relationship. You just need to take a second to send the one text or to make the phone call or to do the one coffee. And when you think that way, you start operating differently.
I love that. Okay, so time wealth,
Social wealth. Mental wealth is all about purpose, growth, and your ability to create space to wrestle with these big unanswerable questions of life. And that could be through solitude, meditation, through spirituality or religion, but being able to create that space in your life. Physical wealth is all about your health and vitality, your ability to control the controllables, to fight against that natural decay that your body is going through. And then financial wealth is the 5th. And with the important nuance of really focusing in on what your definition is of enough, of what your enough life looks like, so that you stop chasing whatever more the world is telling you about and you understand when you have enough so that you can start focusing on one of these other types of wealth.
But how do you know when you have enough?
You have to clearly define what that life looks like to you. Typically, when people talk about the word enough, they talk about a number. They're like, oh, I need to get $10 million.
Yeah.
But it means nothing to them in their mind. You don't know what that means. So you
No.
say, like, if you have $1 million and you say, oh, 10 million, then I'll have enough. But you don't know what that implies about your actual life. What does my life look like when I have enough? And I walk through this visualization exercise of understanding, what are you doing? Like, where are you? How are you living? What do you have 2 homes? Do you have 3 homes, 4 homes? Do you spend your time with your kids? Are you traveling around? Like, what does the life actually look like? Because once that's clear, once it's almost like a vision in your mind, it becomes much harder for it to be this like subconscious mirage that just disappears and gets further and further away. You can actually start seeing yourself living in that version of your enough life.
So, when I was reading your bio, I read a little blurb from Tim Cook, the Apple CEO. He's become a mentor of yours. I learned from the book. So tell us how that happened.
So I met Tim in 2014. He was one of 5, 6 people that would show up at the gym every single morning at 4:45. So I had just started my first job in that was August of 2014. And I knew that I was going to be working like 80, 100-hour weeks in this finance job. And so if I wanted to continue working out, I would have to get to the gym really early in the morning so that I could get to the office by 6:30. So I started waking up at 3:45. I'd get to the gym by about 4:30, 4:45, right when it opened, and then go on. And there were 5, 6 other people that showed up every single day at that time. He was one of them. For the first 6 months, I had no idea who he was. I just talked to him every single day because he was one of 5, 6 people. I wasn't in tech, and he wasn't nearly as famous as he is now. He had just become CEO. And so we had become friendly, and then basically just like asked if he'd be willing to spend some time together, chat, learn from him. I wasn't looking for a job. I wasn't like asking for something. I just wanted to learn. I was early in my career. And was very fortunate that he said yes. And over the last 10 years, he's become an incredible mentor and friend, supported. I mean, he was a big part of sort of giving me the courage to take the step away from what I was doing previously to march down this different path. Sometimes when you're making those big decisions, it helps when you have like one person that kind of says like, I think you should go for it.
Yeah.
And he was definitely one of those figures in my life.
Yeah,
So
I love that.
very
For
lucky.
someone who's watching or listening who wants a mentor, because I know you probably get a million messages, and so do I, of people who are like, hey, want to be my mentor? And you're like, oh God, I just, I have so many of these. And it's different with you because you built a relationship organically. But if someone is trying to find someone like that, someone who can give them guidance or help them through this journey of life, do you have any tips for them?
First tip, never ask someone to be your mentor. And that sounds crazy, but asking someone to be your mentor is the most intimidating, very it's a very formal request. That idea of mentorship is sort of dead. The idea that one person can provide everything you need for your life's journey is kind of a crazy idea, like that they can
100%.
provide a map that matches your terrain. It doesn't really make sense. I really, and I write about this in the book, love this idea of building a personal board of advisors.
Yes,
Building the idea of like different people that you can call upon for different things in your life. It never needs to be so formal as, will you be my mentor? Like you're asking someone to marry you or something.
Yeah, it's like a big commitment.
No, totally. You can just build genuine relationships with people you admire, people you look up to, people you think have domain expertise or knowledge around spaces that you would like to know more about. And then as you build those relationships, you can call upon those people. You can provide them value along the way as well, obviously. So it's not just a one-way, ATM relationship. And if you do that, then you have this diverse group of people that you can call upon. Like I'm not going to text him or call him every single day asking him a bunch of questions. He's the CEO of the biggest company in the world. I would never, do that. It would be silly. And nor do I think that he has the answer for all of these things that I'm doing. There are he doesn't work in media. I would much rather call you to ask you a question about media things. And so I think that the idea of mentorship is a bit dead. The other piece to it is this whole model of thinking you can like network is a little dated. Networking implies a transaction. It implies like hey, I'm going to come to you with my hand out. What you're really trying to do is just build relationships. And the only way genuine relationships are built is through creating value for other people, through building and giving with no expectation of return. And if you do that, if you approach every relationship with the idea that I'm going to know this person for the next 30 years, how do I want to operate? I'm certainly not going to do anything short term. I'm not going to make any silly decisions if I'm going to know this person for 30, 40 years. I'm going to operate with the expectation that it's going to be a give and take over long periods of time. And that will lead to a lot better, longer, deeper, more meaningful relationships being built.
Do you know the acronym DTM?
No.
So my kids are teens, as I mentioned to you before. Like networking to me, in the like way what people go to networking dinners and they have their like name and their business card, is like trying too hard. So the DTM means doing too much. That's what the kids say these days for like a trying too hard. It's like when someone wants to be your friend, but they're like maybe doing a lot to try to be your friend, and that feels almost like it almost repels you, right? Like, so I think networking in the way of like giving value, like you're saying, or giving that person space to maybe tell you something that they think would be a good advice without putting that pressure on the relationship is such a better way to do it than trying to get someone to be your mentor. So that's really, really great advice, because I think that's pretty impressive that you have all these amazing people, by the way, who wrote you endorsements. And these are all like friendships or relationships that people would die for. So that's clearly a skill that you've acquired or that you've had.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very, very fortunate to have people in my life who I feel like have supported me when they really didn't have a great reason to support me. And people ask me this question often of like, how do you do that kind of thing? And I honestly don't really have a good answer for it, other than trying to truly create value for other people and make sure that you can, give generously even when you have no expectation of receiving in return. And generally speaking, when you do that, you end up receiving in return.
Totally. And maybe not from the same person, but from like another source.
Yeah, the energy that you put out into the world, you receive.
Yeah.
And I really do fundamentally believe that. Call it karma, call it whatever you want. But I think that is very real with relationships.
Yeah. And I think when you're trying to build a life with social connection, I feel like even that with friendships these days, I think that you have to remember that to really cultivate friendships, it's not necessarily transactional give and take, but it's literally like you're trying to anticipate what that person might need from you, or maybe you're busy, but they need your support. Trying to give and not necessarily expecting like tit for tat return. It's a great way for people who are like, I don't have a lot of close friendships or relationships. I get that message anytime I post. I don't know if you get this, and maybe my audience is very female. Anytime I post about social connections, I get a bunch of messages of like, I can't find any good friends. I don't have any close contacts. We live in this very weird world right now where people are really lonely and they're having a really hard time finding that social wealth. So what are some strategies and tips that people can use?
Yeah, we are in the middle of a massive loneliness epidemic. And look, social media has contributed to this enormously. Teenagers and young people are the worst off in this world. I think I saw a statistic recently that teenagers in the United States are spending 70% less time in person with their friends than they were 2 decades ago. Terrifying statistics when you think about playing that out over a long period of time. I think that the best advice, I have this section in the book. So at the end of each section, there's one for each type of wealth. At the end of each of those, there's a guide for actually building that type of wealth into your life, real systems that you can use. And in the social wealth section, there's something that I call my anti-networking guide. So the idea of like, you're not networking, you're building. Yeah. And one of the concepts that I bring out there is to find value-aligned rooms. And what I mean by that is think about what your real core values and interests are. Then think about where do you find a whole lot of other people that are like that have similar core values and interests to you? So if you are really passionate about health, a value-aligned room would be like a farmer's market or a gym
I
or going to a space, going to like an outdoor hiking trail, or if you're into dogs,
Or
going to a
yoga
dog
retreat.
park,
Yeah.
going to a retreat, going to a yoga, going on Groupon and finding an outdoor yoga thing. You're going to find a whole bunch of other people who have a similar set of core values and interests. That is going to be, generally speaking, a much higher density of the type of people that you might build a close relationship and bond with. So it's kind of this example of like, think a little bit differently about how it is that you go about finding your people for this phase of your life. The other thing to be aware of, depending on where you are on your journey, is that periods and seasons of loneliness are often a tax on personal transformation, meaning you actually have to pay that tax. It is sort of a cost of entry to changing your life in some ways. I've thought about that a lot on my own journey, that when I was changing from where I was and the path I was on to the path I am on now, there was a long period where it felt very, very lonely because you are changing and adapting, and your prior environment did not. And so the people that you previously felt close to, that you previously felt you spoke the same language as, quite literally, you will not be speaking the same language anymore. You will have an entire set of interests and passions and excitements that they no longer really connect with. And you have yet to attract the new people into your life that will see you on the other side of that transformation. So what happens is you feel this extreme period of loneliness where it can feel really dark, but when you embrace it as sort of the cost of entry for this transformation that you were trying to create in your life, I think that's an empowering way of looking at it as well, of recognizing that it's part of the process. It is a natural part of your growth and change as a person.
I remember I got introduced to a life coach from someone who's super, super famous. And the life coach said, I'm this person's like best friend because as this person grew in their business, just like you're saying, like she felt like a lot of people were coming to, have a transactional relationship or get something from her or like, and started to realize like her circle was changing. She was no longer friends with or doing the same thing as her friends before. And then she was getting all these people kind of coming into her world trying to just be transactional or taking something from her. And so she ended up being very lonely and was using kind of this life coach as now a friend and really had the family and the friends. And I'm like, wow, that could be really isolating. But you're right. It's probably just because it's like a transition until you find your new set of people. That's more empowering than thinking like, oh, this is it. I can't have any more close friends.
Yeah, that idea as a macro idea of seasons in your life is a really empowering idea. I write about that a lot in the upfront section of the book, that your life does have these seasons, and you are going to have seasons of growth. You're going to have seasons of destruction, seasons of darkness, seasons of loneliness. It's going to be this like these waves, these different seasons that come and go in your life. And what you prioritize or focus on during any one season can and will change. You will have a season in your 20s when you are really focused on building financial wealth and having that be a base and a foundation for your life. As you get into your 30s and 40s, you may well want to prioritize your young children and have a season of being a mother or being a father when that's really what you lean into. As you become a retiree, you may want to refocus on your purpose and finding some new calling for the rest of your life. What you do during any one season does not constrain you in any way from changing in a future season. And that concept has been the single most empowering one for my wife and I. I mean, when we were having our first child, my wife was very much on this like fast track as a fashion designer, rising through the ranks, very competitive industry, doing really well. But she was very certain that she wanted to be focused on being a mom during this season of life when he was so young, when he prior to going to school. And that was sort of looked at oddly by a lot of people, that she was making this decision. But this idea of seasons was really empowering in the sense that she knew that she could focus on being a mom during this one season of life, and it wasn't going to stop her from then going back and pursuing her interest in design in some different way in a future season. That you can focus on one thing and then change. You are a dynamic creature and you can adjust across these different seasons of your life.
Yeah, I love that. Even with like health and fitness. So I wanted to talk about body health because of course I talk so much about health and mindset health but also body health. But I also feel like with that there's seasons because I think I was really obsessed with fitness for a long time because I found that it was bringing me a lot of clarity, a lot of focus, a lot of discipline. But then over the last year, as I moved into this season of travel and media and like all these new things were happening, I realized I'm like, you know what? This is not the time for me to do these like ridiculous 2-hour workouts on a regular basis. Like this is a time to maybe do more walking and weight training and whatever I can do when I'm traveling. So I think there's also seasons, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you can't change your fitness routine or your nutrition routine as you move through those seasons too. So talk to us a little bit about body health. What are some basic things that if someone's like, really want to master that part of my life?
So I break down physical wealth across 3 pillars, which are movement, nutrition, and recovery. And the way that I like to think about physical wealth is really using like a video game analogy, meaning you start on level 1. And once you kind of beat level 1, then you can move to level 2, then you can move to level 3. And the reason I think that's so important is because we live in a day and age where you are bombarded by information on social media that is effectively level 100 information. It's like someone doing the most esoteric, absurd set of routines and things, and we all see it. Whatever the like craziest version is that you can do, people are doing it because that's what gets clicks and likes and shares. And unfortunately, what it does to the beginner, the person just starting out that maybe wants to start creating the positive change in their life, is it convinces them that they can't do those things. They're, oh my God, I can't do a physical health routine if that's what it looks like. So they do nothing. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is that level 1 across those 3 pillars is for movement, just move your body for 30 minutes a day. Doesn't matter whether it's walking, jogging, biking, dancing, hiking, whatever it is that you like to do, just move for 30 minutes a day. Nutrition, eat whole unprocessed foods 80% of your meals. Call that 17 out of 21 meals a week. Great start. Recovery, sleep 7 hours a night. If you do those 3 things on a daily basis for a month, you're probably getting like 90% of the benefit, 90% of the benefit. You're definitely ahead of 80% of the population
100%.
if you just do that consistently every single day. And then from there, you can start getting fancier and more complicated. You can go to level 2 and you can think about, balancing resistance strength training with cardiovascular training on the movement side. You can think about nutrition, upping that to 90% of your meals that's whole unprocessed. Recovery, you can try to get 8 hours of sleep. Maybe you can add sauna or cold plunge or things that promote recovery, breathing protocols. But once you're just getting started, just focus on level 1. Just nail those boring basics.
And I think this goes without saying, probably for all the types of wealth, is like focus on your own journey. I think what happens to a lot of people, because health is so trendy and wellness is so trendy, that you feel overwhelmed. You see X person getting great results doing this thing that's totally different than what you're doing. So you abandon what you're doing and you start to do what that person's doing. And then 2 weeks later, the same thing happens. There's a third person. And so I end up seeing a lot of people saying, well, I've tried everything and it's not working. It's not that you've tried everything. It's that it's like a shiny object syndrome and you never use that compounding effect because you didn't do it long enough.
You hit the eject button too early.
Yeah. And I think that's probably true with all the types of wealth because I see it in business too now that I'm in this in medicine when I was doing straight up doctor medicine. I don't know if I really saw it as much as I do now is that you kind of have to stay the course. And even though someone came out with crypto this and, there's like a fast way to get to the top and social, there are all these tricks and tactics, but it's really about finding what your journey is and staying true to your journey. Like I keep realizing like our destinations are all different. And as long as I know where I'm going, and even if it's slow and tedious and there's setbacks, that's the journey. And I feel the same way about fitness. And I feel the same way about family and social connections because there's all these things to fast track that too. But
Yeah, compounding fundamentally,
Yeah.
just mathematically,
I
is
saw your video on it.
yeah.
Can you explain it
I
to
mean,
people who?
compounding is returns to the power of time. So it's the returns you generate to the power of time. Time is the exponent. So that's the thing that really matters. It's the amount of time you're allowing it to happen. So when you press the eject button on these things, when you switch routines, when you jump, you leave a job after 6 months, when you jump out of a relationship the second it gets hard, when you do all of those things, you are literally not allowing the most important thing to happen, which is the time. And to your point, like I have this card on my desk that just says run your race with your capitalized. And that to me has become this mantra in my life. Like came when I ran my first marathon. I was running it and there were all these, I was starting to like really suffer at the end of it. And there's this tendency, you see other people passing you to like want to try to like speed up and do things. But I knew that if I did that, I was going to cramp up and not finish the race. And so I kept saying over and over in my head, run your race, run your race. And that is true for life. You need to figure out what race you want to run and then run it to the best of your ability. That really, as a meta point, is what this entire book is about. It's about identifying what truly matters to you, not what culture tells you should care about, not what your friends tell you, not what social media tells you or your parents tell you, what you actually care about, what your race should be, and then taking the actions to go and run it to the best of your ability.
Did you, when you were running training for your marathon, I never have done a full, I've only done halves.
Half's a great distance, by the way.
Yeah,
much better.
I loved half because I felt like it didn't injure me and it wasn't such a stretch from like a casual run. But I definitely felt that when I was training because you want to run your race, but then you see someone else that's running their race better, quote unquote, than you are. And you don't know anything about them and you don't know if they're going to slow down later, but it's very tempting to kind of look around. And the more you look around, the worse it gets. And that's like a metaphor for all of this stuff, right? Like the more you kind of look at what's happening around you, I feel like that on social media all the time.
Yeah. I mean, the least happy I ever am, like if I were to track my happiness during the course of different days, guaranteed the low points would be when I'm scrolling around on social media.
Same.
And it's just because that's what that is. You're looking at a whole bunch of other people and you're basically looking at the highlight reels of them running their race because no one really shares the reality. They just share the good. And that breeds unhappiness. And so you kind of like, you think about your days, and your best days are when you're like focused on action and you're doing things and there's structure around it and you kind of know what you're doing. Your worst days are when you're kind of floating and you end up just sitting there scrolling, comparing yourself to others. Stress and idleness, stress and anxiety really feed on idleness. When you are sitting around doing nothing, that's when you start to feel stressed or anxious that you're not doing enough. If you're acting, you're kind of starving your stress of the oxygen it needs to breathe. And so fundamentally, I just think all of this comes down to not hiding from action. Like just go into the thing, do something, take an action.
Are you into New Year's resolutions? I know we're like kind of at the beginning of the year.
I'm big on New Year's intentions. So I stopped setting resolutions because I thought that it was a little crazy that you could on January 1st have like a thing that you were going to set and have that be the right thing that made sense for the whole year. So I started focusing on intentions with the idea being it was much more about like direction versus an end thing. But I love the idea of sort of using this like natural arc of the year to establish this new set of principles.
And it's nice to also like look back at January, like last year. I think I like to reflect backwards a little bit, more to try to take a checklist of like what's working and what's not. But I think you're right. I don't think you can predict the full year at the beginning of the year anyway. We did like the first time I've ever done, because like I said, I was like a regular, quote unquote, regular doctor, just like a year and a half ago. And I was working full time. I've kind of cut down my hours over the years and like really cut down recently to focus on other creative things. But I think sitting down and making a plan for the year of what I want to accomplish in this world, I realize I can't really do that because I only know what like 3 months ahead, what I want to do. Like I want to keep working on this project and that project, but you can't really predict the full year. So I think having intentions is probably a better idea.
Yeah, I have this thing in the book. My parents, at a time in my life when I was feeling pretty lost, 4 years ago, my parents gave me this little silver compass. And on the inside, there was this inscription that just said, "So you may always know where your true north lies."
Oh, I love that.
And the whole idea was focus on direction, not speed. It's much better to climb slowly up the right mountain than it is to climb fast up the wrong one. And so often when we look around, when we spend time staring at other people, comparing ourselves, we start getting speed obsessed. We start wanting to speed up, get to the end point faster and
Oh,
faster and
100%.
faster. When the reality is you really just have to focus in on finding the right mountain, the mountain that you actually want to be climbing. And then just start walking towards it and keep walking every single day and just do it in a way that you can do over and over and over again, not in a way that's going to burn you out so that you fall back or that you have to take a bunch of steps back. And I think that more and more of my mentality over the last few years has developed in that way because I am naturally wired as like an athlete. I come from an athletic background. I want to go fast, like intensity, that's my natural wiring. And I've had to ease back on that to understand that direction is so much more important than speed. And so
What happened 4 years ago, by the way, that you were in that low place?
I had spent the first 7 years of my career very much chasing this definition of success that was not my own. This idea of trying to fix my own internal insecurities by getting enough external affirmations that I was impressive. And that was generally through making money. I basically thought and had convinced myself that if I made X amount of money, that I would one day wake up and feel good about myself. And unfortunately, my own priorities around that had grown so narrowly, myopically focused on money that a lot of other areas of my life had started to suffer. My relationship with my parents was really suffering. I was only seeing them about once a year. My sister and my relationship had kind of ground to a halt. My wife and I were struggling to conceive at the time. That was creating strain. I was drinking 6-7 nights a week. I was pretty unhealthy mentally and physically. And it was all because I had grown so focused on this one thing at the expense of everything else. And, there's this one conversation that was kind of the turning point. I went out for a drink with an old friend. This is in May of 2021, so 3.5 years ago. I was still working in my prior job, working in finance, sounded impressive on the surface. And we sat down and he asked how I was doing. And I said that it had started to get tough being so far away from my parents. They were on the East Coast. We were living in California. And he asked how old they were. And I said mid-60s. And he asked how often I saw them. I said once a year. And he just looked at me and said, "You're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die." And I just remember feeling like I had been punched in the gut. The idea that the amount of time you have left with the people you care most about in the world is so finite and countable that you can count it on a few hands was just jarring. And within 24 hours, I'd had a conversation with my wife about us maybe making a change. And within 45 days, I had left my full-time position. We had sold our house in California, and we had moved back to the East Coast to be closer to both sets of parents. And that was really the turning point. It was really this decision to place our true north at the center of our lives and build a life around that rather than continue to march down this default path. And that's really, this book is sort of an outflowing of that decision to decide what actually mattered to us and then go build a life around it.
That's so interesting. So do you feel like by making that change and that decision that all the areas of wealth got better?
It certainly allowed me to then take action on all of the other areas of wealth.
Yeah, like it opened up.
It didn't just magically. My social wealth improved immediately.
Yes.
We lived, that number 15 more times turned into the hundreds.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I get to see my parents multiple times a month.
Yeah.
Really dramatically changed certain things about my social wealth. But the other areas, it's like what we talked about. It's daily investments. It was more that it allowed me to create the space that I could think about and focus on, okay, what are the actions that I can take to build a life around these other things? The first step, though, was just figuring out what these things even were. I didn't have this framework. None of it, I went on a journey to try to understand what makes for a meaningful life.
Yeah.
I went and talked to thousands of people over the course of the last 3 years. Old people who had lived long lives, young people, what you've envisioned for the future. And what I realized was that basically everyone wants the same thing. And it was time, people, purpose, and health. Those were the 4 things across the board everyone talks about as part of a meaningful life that they want. Money is sort of an enabler to some of those, but it's not an end in and of itself. It's kind of a tool, but not the goal, if you will. And that was what sparked this whole thinking of, okay, well, if that is what I'm trying to build towards, I need a way to measure that so that I know that I'm making progress on it. And that is really the outflow that I point to here when I think of the book.
That's amazing. What is, since I talk so much about health and fitness, what is your personal fitness and nutrition routine?
I'm a little bit of a maniac now. I talk all about level 1, level 2, but I definitely play on different levels. I mean, with the caveat that I've been doing this since I was 15, 16 years old when I started training for baseball. I recently, call it, a year and a half ago, got into the running thing. And so balancing running with my strength training has really been my pursuit physically over the last couple of years. Trying to run marathons while not looking like a marathon runner was like the big challenge. So I was probably, during my like real normal training times, I'm running 6 days a week and lifting, 4 to 6 days a week, depending. And that's a combination of, longer runs, shorter, faster runs, different things like that. And then on the lifting side, I've basically been doing the same thing for the last 10 years. Which
so
is
you don't have a trainer or some kind of routine that you follow?
I have people that I train with. And generally speaking, I have them program the lifts we're doing, so that it's not in my hands. But I don't have, I basically try to train all of the different body parts during the course of a week. Probably now more bodybuilding focused than powerlifting focused as it used to be, just because I don't really see the value in me trying to deadlift 500 pounds anymore and just hurting myself. I'd much rather just, focus on aesthetics, I guess. From a nutrition standpoint, I am very big believer in just focusing on the simple things. So what I do is I try to make sure every single day that I hit my protein goals, which for me is anything over 200 grams of protein a day.
How many pounds are you about?
How much?
How many pounds?
Do I weigh? 185.
So you're pretty much doing a pound or a little more than a pound.
I do probably a little more. If I'm running a ton, if I'm taking a huge toll on my body, I try to go to 1.2 grams per pound. But generally speaking, right around 1. And what I find is that if I'm eating that much protein, it's satiating enough that I'm not going to cram junk foods and things like that. I'm also I don't have a sweet tooth, so I'm not going to do the big cheat meal thing. For me, I love my routines. And so I generally speaking just eat the same thing every single day. And then basically I kind of fill in the other macros of carbs and fats depending on what my goals are in that moment. If I'm running a lot more, like I'm training for the marathon, the carbs will be significantly higher. If I'm not running as much, like right now, it would be higher fat, lower carb on a daily basis, typically.
Got it. And supplements?
Supplements, I take on a daily basis. Let's see, fish oil. I take creatine, about 5 grams a day. And then I take a sleep kind of cocktail of L-theanine, magnesium.
Do you have trouble sleeping?
I used to, but I think that was much more driven by mental health issues than anything
what do you mean?
else. Just bad anxiety at night.
I had the same thing. I think it comes from that stress, adrenaline overload. I wasn't doing a really good job managing my mind, and then it would come at me at night. That was
this one breathing method completely changed my life with my sleep. It's called the 4-7-8 method.
Oh yeah.
You inhale for a 4 count through your nose, hold for a 7 count, and then exhale for an 8 count through your mouth. And 5 rounds of that, I find just knocks me out. And scientifically, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which triggers rest and recovery. And that was a dramatic improvement in my life.
And also gets you out of your prefrontal cortex, which is what a lot of us ruminate or think about your to-do list or what you did wrong that day or whatever. And by doing the 4-7-8 breath or, visualizing, meditating, whatever, all of those things take you away from that prefrontal cortex, which is such a problem for so many of us because all day long we're just stuck in that one area. and getting out of that is so important. So I think sleep is often an issue for people who are very stressed and high strung because they're not able to kind of control their mind as well. Do you
That's
meditate?
I have never been able to do like a static
Yeah.
meditation, if you will. I think of a lot of my walking as
Yeah,
walking
same,
meditation because I
same.
walk without any technology or anything.
So you leave it at home or you put it away?
Leave it at home typically. If it's in my neighborhood, I'll just leave it at
Yeah,
home. If I'm
yeah,
like off somewhere, I have my
yeah.
phone on me. But I have a tough time if it's on me, not
Yes,
checking it.
same.
And so I leave it at home. Um, the other one that's really helped me with sleep, which is probably similar to what you were just saying, is I do something before bed that I call my 1-1-1 method, which is I
Okay.
write down one win from the day,
Oh, I love that.
something that I felt good
Yeah.
about, one point of stress, tension, or anxiety, something I want to get off my brain and onto the paper, and then one point of gratitude, something I felt grateful for during the day.
Love that.
It takes like 3 minutes and it immediately triggers this sense of calm. Like it's sort of a cue that the day is over and that I can relax.
I love
And
that.
it's kind of my version of journaling. Like I've never been able
Yeah.
to get into journaling in a heavy way. And so it's a simple thing that really does help a lot with going to sleep. And for high strung and type A people, it forces you to acknowledge a win during the day, which is generally speaking a good thing.
Remind me to tell you about the championship statement that's going to help you journal because I'm just like you and I cannot do it, but I'll tell you about it. But I want people to hear first, I want to hear last question. How did you decide to write this book? Like, it sounds like you spent 3 years on it. Was it part of your own journey or was it because you felt like you needed to tell people about your old self or what was the impetus?
The book is definitely a manifestation of my journey, but it is not about me. The prologue shares my story. The book is not about me. I was very much called to write it because the ideas in this book changed my life.
Yeah.
And I fundamentally believe that for anyone else out there, the ideas will have an impact on yours.
Oh, yeah. This should be like essential reading for people.
I really think that when I think of the books or the things that have impacted me the most, it's really been about prompting me to ask the right questions. And so I say this at the front of the book. This book doesn't have the answers for your life. Kind of seems like a crazy thing to say at the start of a self-improvement book, but it's really true because you already have the answers within you. You just haven't asked the right questions yet to uncover them. And that is what this book has. It is helping you ask the right questions so that you can sit with those questions and then uncover the right answers for you during whatever season you're in life. And the cool thing about it is you'll come back to it. Like the way that you experience this book in your 20s as you read it will be very different than in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s. And my readers of my newsletter range from a 14-year-old, as far as I know, is the youngest, on through 99-year-old. And
Wow.
all of them will find value in this book, just in very different ways, because the questions it forces you to ask are universal. We all face these exact same fundamental questions about our lives. The answers you come to and the lens through which you view the questions will be very different. And so that's part of what I think makes it so interesting.
Is your email newsletter kind of an extension of what you put on social media and what you put in your book, or is it a whole different genre?
It is an extension, I would say. I mean, that is my baby. Like that is what I've built over the last several years.
How many people are on your email?
Almost 1 million, 800,000
Wow,
or
that's
so.
great.
I send it twice a week. That's been my primary focus. All of
Love
the
that.
social media content that I put out is a derivative off of the newsletter. So I write the
Got
newsletter
it.
twice a week, and then some of the content from that I end up creating, videos, tweets,
Got it.
short form stuff that goes out elsewhere.
Do you find that now people are less into email newsletters, or you find that it's just as interactive, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I haven't seen any drop off. I do
Interesting.
think it's probably harder now to start like a general
Yeah.
self-improvement newsletter than
Yeah.
it was when I started mine.
Yeah.
It's power laws like anything else.
Yeah.
So like, now, there's probably a few that are of the scale
Yeah.
where I feel like mine has gotten to. I think it would be hard to start the exact same type of what I'm writing now.
Now, yeah.
I would, if you were going to go start one, anyone out there listening,
Yeah.
like I would really try to focus in on like exactly who you're speaking to
Yes.
and what they're getting out of opening this email, because we all get a lot of emails.
I know. It's like, I feel like also Gmail has made it so hard. Like sometimes I'll want to read a newsletter, but it goes in my promotions tab.
This is the most frustrating thing in the world.
Yeah, I was like, I want to get it. Like, I like drag it over. Yeah.
I mean, there are times when like I've sent emails that literally had 0 promotion in them, and it'll end up in a promotions. And I'm like, I don't know what it is. You can test certain things, like you can test sends to see if it's going to hit that. But out of the blue, it'll go. Like, I do an annual review, like this personal annual review where I reflect back on the prior year. It's in the book. You can like kind of walk through this process for reflecting, and on a quarterly or annual basis. Very, very valuable thing. Probably one of the most important things I do all year. For whatever reason this year, when I put like 2024 annual review, it went to the updates thing on Gmail for everyone. So like the open rate on it was like 1/5 of what it normally is on one of the most important newsletters that I send. And so it's like
that's so
really annoying. Like this wasn't an update email. It was just,
it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And do you remember when blogs were, so when I first started, like I always keep saying like quotations when I was like a doctor, but when I was working full time and I was just doing this kind of as a side, not even a hustle. It was like I didn't get paid at all. I was just like writing blogs for free. I remember when blogs were like all the rage, and then all of a sudden nobody read blogs anymore. It was like everybody stopped doing blogs, and then it was like email newsletters were a thing. And then not that it stopped, but it's obviously much harder to get people to read emails. Even I find myself having a harder time like reading emails because we get so many emails that are like we don't want to look at. So it's hard to like sift through the ones that we do want to look at. And then now it's like social media focused, right? And like I'm sure there's going to be a next iteration, whatever it is. Like, I don't even know what maybe it's like the virtual glasses and audio, or
I think people. I mean, I still think email is really king in terms of engaging with people. I certainly think if you have things to sell or you have some sort of offer, email is really good. A lot of people talked about SMS for a while, but it's very short, so it's very hard to like get real depth there. What I like about the email is that if a tweet can be a couple hundred words, like my newsletter can really go deeper on a topic, and I can explore things and test things with people and share more depth about my life in an environment where people have opted in. So you also don't get the like toxicity and negativity that you get. If I share the exact same thing on Twitter versus on my newsletter, the amount of like people that yell at me that I'm a bad person is way higher on one of those than the other, which is never, it might not bother you, but it's never fun. So yeah.
I think that getting negative feedback, the funniest thing is that the first time I ever had a viral post, I got the worst comments. I mean, these are like super mean comments. And now I realize every time a post goes viral, the way I know it goes viral is I have these weird, like people who have like fake, I don't even know if they're real accounts or not, but, or they're just like anonymous hate accounts. I know that it's going viral when I start to get a bunch of ones that they don't know who you are. They're just questioning everything you say. Like, that's not true. Like, I'm like, like you didn't even read, it's interesting because now I'm like, oh, that means it's doing well. Like if it's going viral, that I start to get those comments. Do you talk about that at all? Like how do you deal, or in life in general, in your work, how do you deal with those hate in both virtually and in person?
I generally operate under the principle that I have never wanted to trade lives with someone that was a hater on the internet.
That's so true.
I try to default to empathy with the recognition that anyone who spends time belittling or demeaning someone on the internet is generally not a happy person. There's something going on in their life that is leading to them feeling unhappy. And I think that provides a lot of calm when you're facing that, because you realize that like happy people don't talk shit on the internet. Excuse my language. They just don't. They have other things that they're doing in their life. Like I've never once in my whole life thought to do that because I want to go hang out with my son instead, or like see my wife, or just like hang out with my parents, or do literally anything other than argue on the internet. And I think that has provided me a lot of a lot of just like confidence.
Yeah, I love that. So tell us where we can find the book, where we can find more about you, how we can support you, all of that stuff.
Well, you can find the book anywhere books are sold, which is very exciting for me to say. It'll be in all your local bookstores. Obviously, you can get it on Amazon. It'll also be in Target stores around the country, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
And you can find me at Sahil Bloom on any platform. And my newsletter's at my website, sahilbloom.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much is there an audiobook version too?
There is an audiobook that I narrated myself.
Oh God, wasn't that painful?
Painful.
So painful.
Painful. Living in a box for 4 days.
Oh
but
my God.
Very glad that I did it myself.
Yeah, I think that is really, because I think a lot of people listen to, especially self-improvement books. Audiobooks are huge for that. So thank you so much for the conversation. You guys should all go out and check this out, The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. And this is your
My first book.
This
Yeah, maybe
is
my last. Who knows?
I highly doubt that.
We'll see.
But thank you for being on.
Thank you.